Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Akosh. I'm the host of Airtime Webinars, a series of discussions with research product and, as of today, design leaders about the nitty-gritty details of building products. Now, today, my guest will be Nara Shan, and we'll talk about using internal personas to communicate more effectively with your colleagues. A few things you need to know about Naresh is that he's the co-founder of Design Ops Aligned, which is an amazing agency helping product teams optimize their processes with design ops methodologies. His career spans over 15 years, and I gotta say, he's seen it all. He's been a developer, UI designer, UX, design ops leader. Naresh, I let you continue that list in a minute, so just bear with me. What is also very important that he's a fellow podcast host. He hosts a show called Design Ops Podcast, a very, very successful one. And sorry for putting it out there, but apparently this is your very first time being on the other side of the table. So I'm grateful for taking this leap of faith with me.
Yeah, no, it's different. I mean, now I know what my guests go through when I put them on the stage. So it's really different to be on this side for once. So thank you for bringing me on today.
Absolutely. A couple of technicalities. First of all, I see a few people already commenting and saying hi. Thanks so much for joining us. And if you have any questions, if you have any comments about what we're saying, use the comments. I think that's the best way to engage this webinar and make it really interactive. So it's not just the two of us talking to each other and then having a good chat, but you also involved in this. So first technicality. If you want to get the latest webinar recordings or watch past episodes, the easiest way is to follow us on Spotify and YouTube. Number two, if you have any questions, please don't hold back. Don't hold the horses. Put them in the comments anytime during our discussion. And also, if you see a question that you like, leave a little thumbs up. This is my upvoting, very rudimentary upvoting system to make sure that I understand which questions resonate with most people in the audience. Last thing, if you want to do a background check on Naresh or myself, I'll be copying our LinkedIn profile links into the chat. Feel free to get in touch and continue the discussion after the show today. I think I've talked way too long. So now, let me drop this mic in a virtual sense, and Naresh, hand it over to you. I'd love to hear like all the things that you worked on and what you're doing these days.
Yeah, so I think thank you for the introduction. I think you hit the nail on the head. 15 years, man, you make me feel old there. That's why I'm glad I'm wearing this hat to hide all this grace. But yeah, 15 years experience working in front-end development. UI designer, UX, then moving into building teams, managing teams, and then as of like just recently or last year, just created Design Ops Align, and it's been really, really great. So I currently live in Switzerland. I'm initially from South London, as everyone can tell from my accent. So I tried to hide it, but it doesn't seem to be working. Father of 5 kids, so that's also the reason why I have a lot of gray hairs, because 5 kids is a lot to manage, but seem to be doing well. But yeah, as mentioned, the Design Ops Align podcast done really, really well in this first season. So we've only been around since August, and we started the podcast at the same time. And recently, I just checked the numbers. We hit about 60,000 subscribers, so it's
amazing.
Yeah, wow. And I really put it down to all the credit goes to the guests that came on the show. I've had some really great, talented people who have just, been so receptive to come onto the show, and that's how pretty much it's grown so much. So please tune in. Yeah, we'll put the link in the comments. So yeah,
you're more than welcome to do that. Naresh, let's cut to the chase and let's start our conversation with where you got the inspiration for building internal personas, which is Thomas Erikson's book called "Surrounded by Idiots." And in this book, oh, thank you. I'm just looking at. I don't have it on this bookshelf. I have it on the other one, so I'm positioned in the wrong way. What is important, though, is that Erikson describes various personality types. And before we talk about personas, developing internal personas, I'd love to understand what these personality types are and what are
Mhm.
some traits that allow any of us to easily recognize them at work.
So I guess I think Ericsson broke them down into four different colors, and what he did was he kind of analyzed that each color had, as you mentioned, some form of characteristics. So the yellow one is kind of like a very optimistic person, very kind of like, hey, this idea is great, let's go with it. Very energetic and very kind of how should you say, um, likes to emphasize in a lot of things. And then, if you move on to the different colors, they all are different in its characteristics. So the red one, dominant leader, likes to be clear, concise, doesn't want to hear like the whole jargon, just wants to cliff notes and just move on. And then you move on to the green one, who's kind of patient and considerate, but believes in about team building. So wants to bring the whole team along for the ride rather than just work solo. And then you have the blue one, who's very analytic and very kind of, wants to see all the data before making any decisions. So he really did a really good job in building that kind of basic understanding of people that we work with. And I think if you look at what the context I just said of all those characters, everyone can
Yeah.
in their day-to-day work can relate to those type of people.
Yeah. And how's that? Are we a mixture of these
Yes.
colors, a little rainbow, or does everyone have a really dominant color that
Yes.
yeah, how does that work?
Yeah. No, he mentions that. So you can fall into two different colors. And this is
Okay.
one of the key things that we tend to do, that we tend not to do when we try to build our internal persona. I'll kind of go into that reason later on. But yes, you are right. You can be two colors, but one of those colors is always going to be dominant over the other. So if you are a red and a yellow, one of them is always going to be dominant over the other in some sense. You can never be half and half from his perspective. So he does mention that you can fall into those different categories. Sometimes you could probably fall into three categories in some sense, but generally two is the most, I would say, used.
All right. And I was just wondering if like based on the projects that you did lately or maybe beforehand when you worked at companies, if you like could walk me through like a few situations where some of these very dominant characteristics of the four colors came to surface.
Well, I'll give you the background story why I started to use it in the first place and
Yeah.
how I started to use it in the day to day. So it was in my early stages of leading teams, and I would say in my early stage I was managing. I was not really leading teams, and so when I was managing teams, very young, you know, I expected that when you communicated with one person, that you should communicate the same with all, or that
Yeah.
you should treat every single person the same. It's like having kids; you treat them all in some respect the same.
Equally. No,
Yeah,
that's a part of
equally.
fairness that you're all, yeah, exactly.
Yes. So I initially thought that when you're kind of building teams or managing teams, I've really thought that my communication should be the same. But then I noticed after time that it wasn't working. It wasn't really like I wasn't getting the best out of the team. I wasn't really seeing them progress. I didn't see them have job satisfaction. And so that's when I came across this book, and I really saw that each of the team members that I was kind of managing fell into some form of category within the book. And then it really enlightened me that, oh, that's the way you should communicate with them, or that's the way you should really talk to them, and the kind of things you should expect from them. Because I think in my early stages, being a young manager, you expect things to be done fast, and you're expecting results, and you were kind of asking, where's the answer for this? And again, it was young. I was still learning. I was still in my infant stages of kind of leading teams. But then I saw that when I started to use the methodology from Thomas Erikson, it really then gave me a better way to communicate with them, a better way to collaborate with them, and then a better way to really build team cohesion. So I started to label them just personally,
Yeah.
myself, like this person is this color, they
The
should be
red, the
communicating.
ready, the bluey.
Yeah, exactly. It really, and I done it personally, like myself, to
Yeah.
help me become better in really leading them. And then I noticed firsthand after I had adopted this principle, I saw the team change dramatically. They felt like they're being heard. They felt like they were being a team unit. They felt like we're one team and that we are working together. And it also gives you key principles on how to pair up people. So if you know that somebody is a red, you wouldn't pair them up with another red. And
Yeah.
again, vice versa. So the book even gives you details about that. And then from there, it started to evolve even more. Where, as you mentioned, who did I see internally, or where did I see outside of the team? I started to see product managers or VPs or developers fall into those certain categories. And again,
Yeah.
I brought those principles in there to really help in communicating with them and how to even work with them better. So
Amazing. Wasn't it a lot of mental energy to like scan people around you, and like if you're in a fast-paced environment,
mhm.
a lot of times you're struggling to get your daily things done, and then adding that additional layer of empathy of who am I talking to, and then consciously switching my messaging and the words and my phrasing, it sounds like something that is a lot of energy.
I would say yes, it is. It's a lot of hard work in the beginning. I'm not going to lie to you, but
Okay.
then when it becomes part of your day-to-day norm, you start to see that you hold back in communicating with certain people in a certain way. So, excuse me. So, yes, as you mentioned, it is a lot in the
Nice.
beginning to start attuning yourself to say, okay, this person, I should communicate with them in that
Okay.
method. But once it becomes part of your day-to-day routine and you start to notice that the way to communicate and that they're listening to certain aspects of your communication, you start to see a much more better engagement. So it's really the case that, if you're working with this product manager, and we do this, I think communication is one of the biggest issues in UX. You hear about it all the time. We're really
Yeah.
bad in communicating. And one thing I tell team members is never to speak about UX outside of the team. Never start to say, "Hey, we're going to make this information architecture better because the fonts are better on this size and it follows a hierarchy." You're speaking a different language that really the business doesn't understand. So it's
Yeah.
really about then, okay, if you can translate your designs into a better context, into a business value context, that's really great. But then once you've translated it into a business context, how do you then communicate that further to people who are going to be receptive? So then it really does hold back in your technical jargon, your UX jargon, your kind of
Yeah.
day-to-day even interaction with people. So it really does build your foundations on building good communication within the business.
And I also believe it's very compelling when somebody is in a position to explain something really complicated in
Hmm.
layman terms that you understand it. And an example that comes to my mind is a few years ago, I completed an online course in physics at Stanford. And the teacher, had this course about Einstein's theory of relativity, the
Hmm.
special theory. Now, I'm good in math, not in physics. Like, okay,
Yeah.
so it's physics 101. Anything that you get in like a high school, that's as much as I get. But he was able to explain principles, processes, and ideas in terms that even I, like a physics illiterate, could understand. And I think that
Hmm.
it's like he didn't know me, so he didn't tailor it to me, but I assume he had this idea of a kind of audience that tunes in for that
Yeah.
for that course.
But you hit the nail on the head. I think it's knowing your audience, which is very, very key. And we in the design field, we do workshops, we do a lot of collaboration, and it's like bringing in the right people who are going to collaborate and, you know, be receptive. And the same goes for researchers. Researchers are a really good one because they're very infamous for doing like the big reveal. And it's like they go away for like 3 months and they go and do some research paper and they come back and then, you know, they're presenting it. And half the people in that room that they're presenting in is like saying, well, we've done that product 3 months ago, you know, whereas some people might want to hear like, oh, I want to hear all the details of the research. Or somebody might be like, look, I don't even care about your 3-month study. I just want what is my suggestions to do. And I just want the cliff notes and then that's it. So it really does help you in understanding, okay, if I've got this audience there, you know, what is the key ways I've got to communicate with them in order for one, things to be, you know, ingested so that you can influence certain things. And also it really does help you in, you know, I'll put it how we do it in Design Ops Align. We use it also to know who is going to influence certain things in a product team. So if you want to influence culture, you know that speaking to the VP might be the best one, you know, or you might speaking directly to the product managers, and then understanding how to communicate with them would then be the, you know that it will be receptive. So you can see how building internal stakeholders really does bring a lot of business value to a design team.
Absolutely. Let me put a question right up here, because when you mentioned the colors, I also thought of what Sahil is asking about DISC and the colors in Erikson's book. Do they match the DISC styles? And if not completely or not at all, what's the difference?
I don't know the DISC style. Do you know inside out that you can give me some detail?
Well, I have a very superficial knowledge. I also know that it works with colors. There are 4 colors in there, and you can also be a mixture of them. I believe it's the concept is very similar. If we're honest, like we could go back 2,000 years, and even the ancient Greeks identifies 4 different personality types, like basics that we have. So I think in terms of DISC styles, to take that question for Sahil, I take a wild guess here that the overlap is quite substantial, and it's
sounds
just
like
it's just the authors taking their flavor and pinch, their seasoning on that and their personal experience.
Yeah, I'll definitely delve into that, because I think if there is some similarities, again, it works in some sense that some people do fall into some form of category or some form of colorization, as Thomas Erikson put it. But what I liked about Thomas Erikson's methodology is he gives you really ways on how to not just communicate, but also how to work with these people. I think that's what the key thing that I took out of it, not just how they should be operating on a day-to-day basis, but it's also how can you engage with them? How can you give them constructive criticism? How can you say something without them being offended? As managers, this is one of the key things you got to do at the end of the year. And some people take offense by it. But if you know a better strategy and a way to communicate with them, then you can see that the constructive criticism that you can give would be a bit more receptive, rather than feeling that they're being attacked.
Yeah. Let's talk about specifics for a second. Not just for a second, because I'd like to dig into internal personas. So there are the 4 archetypes of personalities. How are they translated into internal personas? What's your method for that?
So let me take this in a better way. We normally use this in Design Ops Align. So when we're working with clients, because in Design Ops Align, we've got a very limited time to really come in and help businesses help with their processes. They only take us in for a certain amount of months. And so what we do with our personas is really like take some form of key demographics. And when I say key demographic, we don't make one of those kind of like, pretty personas that you see on the net, like, with all these little sliders and stuff like that. It just doesn't make sense to us. But one of the key things is that we kind of get like, well, what is this person? What's their name? What is their position? Again, one of the key things is how much influence do they have, and where do they have influence? So, for instance, if you're speaking to a product manager, they probably have a lot of influence in their domain, but they could also be involved in other domains, and they could have influence there. If you're speaking to your VP, he might have influence on the culture, but also he might have influence on the development team and less on the product team. So you got to really utilize it to say, okay, that level of influence is very important to the persona. Another key thing we also add in there, and I look, it's something that me and my business partners always go back and forward. We always put what device these stakeholders have. And the reason why we put that is, if your product manager is looking at, your web application on the iPhone 6, you got to make sure that, you're catering to the iPhone 6, even though it might not be on your browser stack. It might be only like 1%. We put that in there to make sure, because we know that all product managers will look at their phone, they will look at a tablet, or whatever device, and they'll say, hey, this is not working for me, even though it's nowhere on the dev stack, it's nowhere on the browser stack, it's nowhere on the device stack. But we put that in there as key information, because they'll be up in the middle of the night messing around with your application, and they'll message you and say, hey, it's broken. And as designers, that issue's been in that backlog for over 6 months, but the product team have not pulled that up. So those are the key kind of demographics we put in there. And then one of the other things we try and also put in there is, again, what is the color category that they fall into? How do we then communicate with them? What are their kind of pain points? What are their goals this year? Because those are the key things that are going to help you to understand that if they've got certain goals within their year, you got to tune your design features to those goals. If they're saying, hey, we need to get a lot more conversions in this part of the application, you're saying, hey, we need to make the UI of our customer interface much more better. You can see where there's divergence in where goals are. So you really need to understand their goals and where they're trying to aim to. And then another thing is challenges. What do they experience on a day-to-day basis? And it's not something I would say you sit down with them and ask all these questions and then start writing out.
I was just about to ask how you get the data points for that.
No, it's something you got to do naturally. It's something you have to say. I mean, it's easy for us as design ops line because we go in and we do schedule interviews. But when you're in a working environment, you have to do this as a natural thing. As you're starting to learn more, you start to add into your persona template the findings, and you get your team to also commit to adding findings to this persona template, because you shouldn't have it as a solo person creating it. You want your team to be involved in it as much as possible, because they could learn things about a certain behavior that you might have not seen, or they might behave differently to different hierarchies of people. So it's very important that you get your team to also be involved in it as much as possible. And they start to add in as much details. And then you all come to the conclusion, well, what category does this person fall into? Are they a red? Are they a blue? Are they a green? And you all come to that agreement on consensus. And then you all establish a way of communicating with them. So what do I mean by that? If you're going to write an email to this person, they're red. Do not write like a whole essay. Just keep it short and sweet, keep it brief, and they're going to be very, very receptive. The last thing I always add, and I personally, it's a personal thing that I've added into the persona template. You got to also know their relationship status outside of work. Now, it's a very personal thing. I know that. I get that. But the reason why I put that in the template is, imagine they're a parent. And I'm a parent myself. So I know from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock, that is the time I will not check my emails, because I got to put all 5 kids to bed. I got to get them fed, bathed, ready, relaxed. And so I will not be checking my emails between that time. I will also have commitments outside of work. Like I've got to take kids to a football game, or I've got to take them to activities, or I might have a parents' evening. But then that person is only allocated a 9 to 5 slot where you can really get them. So if you know those personal dynamics, you know that you're not going to waste their time with talking, for about an hour about UX when they're not even interested. You've got half an hour. You know that you've got to get to the point very, very quick, but build your story still around that and deliver the message. So this is why I always put in some form of personal data behind it. I know it's personal, don't get me wrong, but it really does help you in understanding, because if somebody doesn't have those commitments or family commitments, they're going to be working until 11 o'clock. They'll be checking their emails all day, all night. So, yeah.
Building on your last point of personal communication and time plan of the other person, my personal experience is that it goes even further. I have an amazing relationship with my co-founder. We've known each other pretty much since birth. But early on in building airtime, I realized that, there are certain time slots that I happen to work and he's not. And it's not just that he doesn't read it. He was even irritated that I'm disturbing his well-deserved me time or time with his friends or others. So it's not just that your message doesn't go across, but you can even create barriers for yourself with that other person, because there's this accumulated frustration that you're bugging them with the right content at the right time or wrong time.
No, you hit the nail on the head. Disturbing people's personal time, I think, really does rub up people in the wrong way. And again, I think me and you both are parents. I saw you posted up something about your
you have 2 kids.
Day. Yeah. Oh man, I can't remember the days I had 2 kids. It was a different lifestyle completely.
We're not going to make this into a competition.
Okay? No, definitely not.
You won.
But you can already see that the time that you have with your family is very, very special. Everyone says you should spend time with them. And a lot of people who are in that situation in the business context, tend to say, well, look, my meetings days are packed. I need to pack them, thoroughly to make sure I get the best out of the day. And so when people come in from a design perspective, especially in design teams, and you get that half an hour with that person, and again, if you didn't know the context of what category they fall in, it's like shouting into the void. You've been able to get time with that person, but really they're not digesting any of the information that's given to you. So if you really know how they want to be communicated, you can get at least about 60-70% of that information over to them for them to digest. So
so in this is like a card, with various fields like demographics, challenges, goals, personal relationship with that person, and then you would make a list or put some post-its with names on it who in your vicinity falls into I'm putting words in your mouth, but I'm just trying to imagine how it works in practice.
Well, we tend to make it as a Word document. I mean, people can make it into these pretty attractive things, but for us, the reason why we keep it so simple and so rigid in some sense, and it is just a Word document, is because things change so rapidly in business. Somebody might leave, somebody might get hired, somebody might get promoted, and so things are constantly changing. And I think we make a bad, and I'm sorry, this is just me just saying from my experience, I think what happens to artifacts like personas, customer journey maps, and you name it, they tend to go on a shelf and build up dust. They never get revised. Or if you have a good team that do keep that updated, generally my experience is that once these personas are made, they're just kind of shipped and that's it. It's kind of stuck on the wall. But going back to your thing, I have done these personas. I like transparency. I don't like to hide stuff. And I don't like to hide things like, oh, this is only for the design team. So in my experience of showing these personas to the people, I have actually had great reception, because they're like, hey, how did you know that's the way to communicate with me. And how did you, sometimes I would say 8 out of 10 times we get it right, but they
Yeah.
really get receptive and they're like, wow, that is exactly what we need. And we've seen other teams try to adapt it across other, but
Nice.
it becomes a mishmash. So I do like that transparency. We do show the persona. Again, we don't write anything rude, like, oh yeah, he spoke to me like this. It's like, hey, his way of speaking is very direct. He doesn't, sorry to use any bad words here, but he doesn't BS. He's very down to the point. Well, this person likes to see a lot of data before making a decision, etc., etc. So you make sure when your teams are getting involved in this, you don't write any derogative kind of comments, because you
Of
do.
course.
Yeah, at one point somebody will access that document, see a picture of themselves up there and be like, well, what's this? And so that builds a lot of problems, in my opinion.
Yeah. But what you described sounds to me almost like a viral product, in a sense that as soon as you put it out in public and you start sharing it, you first of all start a dialogue and you build appreciation from others that you thought about how they want to get information or updates. But at the same time, if you have that, it's like, I don't want to be the one who doesn't use that. Like, I also want to
Yeah.
be conscious of how I'm communicating, so I can easily see how this initial node in a company using internet personas can like create other ones, and then multiple
Yes.
teams adopting it.
Yeah. I mean, let me take 2 steps back. What you just mentioned, we don't make it public, like so you can see it on like a Confluence page or stuff like that. But we
Yep.
do keep it in our repo. But when I say we make it
Okay.
public, we make sure that we have a meeting with that person and we present to them, hey, this is our perception on how to work with you. Are we going
Yeah.
in the right direction? Do you feel like we've added something in there? And I would say 10 out of 10 times, I think the only person who kicked up a fuss was one VP. He said, well, why did you use that profile picture of me? I have a better one on LinkedIn. And he was actually pretty receptive by it. But most people that we've shown these internal personas have been that you have hit it onto the point, literally, word for word, that you put there. That's how I want to be worked with. That's how I want to be communicated. That's when I want to be brought into a workshop. This is when I want to know about a research readout. And it really does help. As mentioned, it doesn't just help you in communicating. When you do a workshop, who to pair up. You can say, well, based on the knowledge we have from Surrounded by Idiots, these 3 people will work together because they're all different colors.
Yeah.
If you put like a red and a red together, you're just going to end up with nothing. So it really even gives you structure on how to do that.
I see. I'm also looking at the clock and just
Oh,
want to
wow.
open the floor for the audience. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. I'll make sure to send all the balls in the direction of Naresh, and we'll cover them. And while people post questions here, I was wondering if you have any like concrete examples of tips of how you tweaked your communication based on which internal persona you were talking with.
I think one of the biggest ones is you got to be very careful how you build a persona for Red. I think they're very dominant. They're very kind of very outgoing. People can misinterpret them as being rude. And it's something I think that gets the most tweaks in some sense. But in saying so, once you've built a persona, and so like imagine you've done all this work, you've been able to translate UX into a business context. Great. You now know how to communicate with somebody. Great. You know that what color they are. Brilliant. Communication and stuff like that is only just one piece of this puzzle. Trust is a big thing. So when you're building these relationships or you want to expect a certain outcome, don't expect it to happen straight away. communication is vital, but once you've built trust with somebody,
Yeah.
it really does build that relationship. Now, trust is a two-way street, isn't it? Because it can't be just one way, and it applies to all relationships in general. Like, you gotta have that back and forward, ability to communicate, and it happens by building that trust aspect, and once somebody in that relationship goes over and breaks that trust, the relationship needs time to mend itself. So do take into account, yes, this methodology will help you in, communicating, brilliant, get people to be receptive, but take into account, you do need to build trust with people, because that's where you do see the magic happen, and that's take time. You can't just come in. You just can't just come in and say, "Yeah, I'm the designer. You should just trust me." It doesn't work like that. You have to be very patient and make sure that you show up and you deliver to build that trust within teams.
I see. I have an extremely intriguing question.
Go for it.
And I put it on the screen. And the question is, like, shouldn't one show up as their authentic self instead of adapting to others? And I think this goes to the very heart and the essence of our discussion. What are your thoughts on this?
You should definitely always show up as your authentic self. Yeah. The methodology that we're talking about today doesn't mean that you should change your self in order to please someone. Don't please people. Yeah. Because that's wrong in all sense. You should not please people in any sense. It's in our nature as designers to please. I don't know why. I even had somebody on our podcast talk about this. But what that framework is telling you is communicate with people in a certain manner. What do I mean by that? So if you're a UX designer and you're trying to present your designs, you know that these people in the audience are going to be receptive when you show a certain amount of information. They're going to be receptive. Let's take the blue one. If you show a lot of data to the blue person, they're going to be like, oh, wow, I can see everything. Whereas somebody who's red is going to be like, well, I don't really care about this data. I just want the suggestions of where you're going and what you're doing. Yeah. So it's about being authentic, but changing your communication and what you say. Because as mentioned, nobody gives a damn about UX outside of the UX team. That's the truth. Nobody cares about it. In my experience, if you start to speak UX jargon, people tend to go different ways, because the business language is completely different to a UX language. So in answer to the sales question, be authentic. Just reframe your communication with the different types of people that are in the audience.
Yeah, I really love the examples that you brought about red and blue. Give me the data. Give me the executive summary. Do you have some more of these? And I know I'm throwing cliches around, but it's still, I think this is something very practical and something very tangible, how we can start thinking about tailoring our messaging to an audience or to a person.
So when I give you an example, like, are you talking about like people that I've worked with in the different colors and how they've helped influence certain things, or?
That's also great if you have some stories that you can share. I'll be here.
Oh man,
I've got a long time to listen to them.
So I've got so many. So let me start with one. I think we had one of our clients who, came to us and said, "Hey, I've been trying my best to change the culture inside of UX and design teams, and she's been trying for months, years, nothing's changed." And we then found out, well, then who are you speaking to? And she's like, "I'm speaking directly to the product team." And we're like, well, there you go. You're not speaking to the right people that are going to be influencing the culture. So then what happened is that she then switched up her game and started to go to the VP, and the VP followed a certain criteria or category. And we said, when you speak to this person, and she was very lucky because that person was a yellow. yellow, a very optimistic person. But he had not known what a UX team can do. He in his perception, he's always been thought that UX are just people that get involved in the UI, just create the pixels, and that's it. And once she got involved with him and started saying, hey, we can do more than that. We can learn more about our users. We can, give you data about how people behave. We can help the marketing team with branding. It really opened up his eyes because he had not known that. And you can't blame him for not understanding what a UX team can do. So you can see she's used the context. She's really made the influence, and or she really spoke to the person who then made an influence on a culture. So that's just one example that we
So
can.
you're just paraphrasing what you're saying here. So you say that a yellow person is someone curious. So if you like,
Yes.
if you throw something new at them, they will not be appalled, but rather drawn to that novelty, and be your partner in
Yeah.
exploring or working on that. Which is
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
if you're looking for an ambassador for your topic within a company, then I guess yellows are your natural targets.
Yeah, but they're very rare to find. Just to let you know, they're very, very rare. Yeah, they're very rare in the sense because they got a lot of energy. They're very optimistic. They want to drive these ideas forward, and they're the best when you do come across them, but very, very rare. The ones that
Right.
are very common, in my opinion, that I've experienced in my time in design ops line and in my career, the blue and the reds are very, very common. Very, very common. Because again, the blues are very data driven, very analytical, and they want to see a lot of stuff before being involved in the idea. But blues are the best ones to really help you get to a product backlog. Now, I know we're short for time, and I know we can't speak about this, but I have a whole discussion about this in general. A lot of design teams don't contribute to a product backlog. They're mainly there as execution. They get told, this is what we're going to be working on for the next 3 months, and this is what we have to deliver. But if you are able to influence people who are going to be involved in a product roadmap and in a planning session, and they're blue, you show them the data that you found, and they're very, very in tune to that. They're very in tune that all the findings that you found, and they will listen to you to really say, okay, let's get this idea into the product backlog. And they become more of a partner rather than seeing UX as a tool.
Yeah. Are certain roles do certain roles tend to be a typical color? Because my thought, as you described this scene, was that, well, product managers work a lot with data. So my instinct was, yeah, product managers are not all of them blue, but maybe they tend to be blue. Is that like, am I just
it's a hard one. It's a hard one to always say that.
I know I'm generalizing, and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to put like a
No,
single
no,
stamp on all the product managers, but the skills that they need, and the what makes a product manager good is just, it's very close to what you described as core qualities of blue.
yes. I mean, you can say that they do fall into that category, but I have seen a lot of product managers in my experience who do fall into that red because they have to deal with a lot of things moving at once, and they're trying to get development lined up. They're trying to get the product roadmap lined up, and they're trying to get designers lined up. And it's, they tend to fall into a red in order to not dictate, but in order to push things forward. So, but then at the same time, I've come across a lot of product managers who are kind of green, and they're kind of like, hey, let's bring the whole team together with this. Let's not do this as a solo. Let's make sure everyone's aligned, and we're all got the buy-in, and we do our technical study. So it does vary. It's very hard to kind of say everyone falls into that. But I think one of the key things is, even though they might fall into green, like from a business perspective, take them from a personal perspective. And then once you get to know them personally, as I mentioned, knowing their personal data, you will start to see they might fall into a green and a yellow, a green and a blue, because we all act differently when we're around a whole large group. It's part of the large group syndrome aspect. But it does take, as mentioned, it does take time to start learning about these internal personas, and make sure you keep your slide deck updated. So
That's I think an amazing final word, unless we have any further questions coming in, because I just wanted to ask about the afterlife of this. So I create my internal personas. How
mhm.
often should I go back to that description? How does it live in the everydays?
I would say generally, yeah, if you want my opinion, I would say you look over them like twice a year, because in
Mhm.
that year, a lot can happen in businesses. A lot. As mentioned, people get promoted, people get moved, people get completely moved to a different department, and so you need to know who's coming in as key players, and then who's next to build a persona. So my best suggestion is always around, I don't know, in Europe we tend to have the influx of changes around March, because that's when people get their bonuses. So it's around the time people get their bonuses,
Yeah,
that's when you need to revise it. And then later on in the year, after summer, and people have decided what they're going to do in their career, if they're going to make changes and stuff like that, I always say after summer coming up into autumn is the best time to revise it.
fantastic. Naresh, thanks so much for sharing your experience around the personality types, what we should know about them, how we turn them into internal personas. You added
Mhm.
all these different fields in there, like demographics, challenges, even device. I remember that, what device that the person is using. Obviously, the personality type in there and your personal connection. I'm indebted for all that wisdom that you shared. Is there do you have like a website or a blog, something where if someone is interested in exploring how to do internal personas, maybe you have some assets, maybe you have some
Yeah,
templates
yeah.
that you can share with the people?
Absolutely. I think we can provide you our base template that we use in Design Ops Align. We can put them in the show notes when you release this, if you're going to release
Oh,
it for later.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If you want to
let's do that.
message me, yeah, if you want to get in contact with me, please do. Get in touch with me through LinkedIn, Narashan. Just please message me. I'm more than happy to share all of this stuff. And also go to our website if there's anyone that anything there that you want to know more about, please get in touch. And our team is really, really great. We're very open to share as much as possible. We hope that people do use this. And again, take into account, we before we just wrap up, we make personas on our end application. That's the whole point why personas was really embedded into UX. So, and you can
Yeah,
see with building external personas, it helps you in building the visual content and the right content and the tone of voice, etc. So you can see if we're doing that for external users, you can build a persona on any person, and you can see how much advantageous it can be. And again, we will give you the template, but tweak it to your best advantage. It doesn't mean that what we give you is set in stone. You change what you think is going to be valuable, but what you want to get out of it is a clear way how to communicate with people, what color they are going to be, and how to work with these people. Because, in my opinion, it will help you show the value of design to businesses.
amazing. Naresh, appreciate that you were
Uh,
here. Thanks for the audience as well, for the questions, for listening to us. Stay tuned, and I wish all of you a nice evening. Naresh, I won't be keeping you. I'll let you get back to
no,
your
thank
kids.
you.
I'll do the same things, and see you guys. See you, Naresh, around, and see everyone in the audience around. Take care.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Bye bye.